Beginning our big story tonight, Newt Gingrich taking aim at President Obama on gas prices.
So the president uses very strong language and says that those of us who believe you can get back to $2 a gallon gas, that it's just politics. Well, that's baloney. It was $1.13 a gallon when I was Speaker. That's a historic fact.
In a moment, I'll ask Newt Gingrich if he can really bring gas prices down to $2.50 a gallon. Also tonight, Harvey Weinstein on Oscar politics and why he says this about the movie that may win it all, The Artist.
This is against all odds. This is the biggest gamble that the company took. It is the most craziest thing ever.
But we begin tonight with Newt Gingrich. His campaign's lost some steam since his win in South Carolina last month. But with the Michigan and Arizona primaries looming on Tuesday, the former speaker so far resisted any calls to drop out of the race. And Newt Gingrich joins me now. Mr. Speaker, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm in Seattle today.
A beautiful part of the world. I've been there many times. Let me start with this big story in Afghanistan, where the repercussions of this Koran burning by American forces there continues to cause a lot of bloodshed and loss of life. You've been very strong on President Obama about his apology. You thought it was completely unnecessary. I want to play you a clip from General Allen in Afghanistan, commanding American troops, which is what he had to say about it.
I offer my sincere apologies. As I have this morning in phone calls to a number of senior Afghans here in Kabul, I offered my sincere apologies to the President, to the government of Afghanistan, but most importantly to the people, the noble people of Afghanistan.
I suppose the obvious question, having heard the General there, is whether you've now changed your view about President Obama's apology, because clearly he was taking his lead from the generals on the ground, and you've always said if you were president, you would do exactly that.
Well, you don't know that he's taking his lead from the general or the general took his lead from the president. I have a very different view of this. First of all, I haven't heard any Afghan apologize for an Afghan killing 2 American soldiers and wounding 4 others. I haven't heard the president ask for an apology from Karzai for the killing of 2 American soldiers and the wounding of 4 others by an Afghan soldier who was probably paid by the United States, trained by the United States, and equipped by the United States. What you have is deliberate fomenting of religious extremism in a situation which wouldn't apply, for example, in Syria, where Assad routinely has bombed anything he needs to bomb. That hasn't happened in other countries in the Middle East as long as it was Muslim against Muslim. And look around the region. Churches get burned in Nigeria. Does anyone apologize? Churches get burned in Egypt. Does anyone get apologized? Of the people who are Christians in Iraq, 1,200,000 when we arrived, 700,000 have fled the country. Has anyone apologized? In Malaysia, churches are burned. Does anybody apologize? There's a one-sided traffic and outrage which we tolerate and, frankly, we help enable. I'm not defending burning the Koran, although the circumstances in which they were being used would strike me as in itself having been blasphemous, because as I understand it, they're being used as part of a process of passing out messages from people who were imprisoned. But I don't know all the details. What I do know is that we have this one-sided game where our troops get killed. Nobody apologizes. And now we're supposed to be the ones on defense. And I understand General Allen's in a difficult situation. But if President Karzai is not prepared to apologize for the killing of 2 Americans by an Afghan soldier, the wounding of 4 others, I think that this is a two-way street, and we ought to assess deeply exactly what we think is going on.
So you think it was wrong of General Allen to issue that apology then before we received an apology, or the American forces received an apology for the death of the 2 soldiers?
I think had the general and President Karzai had a joint appearance and said jointly, this is a very unfortunate circumstance. Clearly, the Americans did not intend to cause religious violation of religious tenets, and clearly the Afghan government deeply regrets the killing of Americans. I'd feel dramatically better. But I think this one-sided street, which is typical of the Obama administration, of going around the world apologizing for America and never demanding respect. These are troops serving under the commander-in-chief, and he owes them some protection. And I think that it's very unfortunate that the rules of engagement seem to be entirely one-sided.
Isn't it a given fact, though, given all the controversy over the burning of Korans? We had the crazy American pastor doing it last year and creating huge havoc for American troops on the ground. Given its sensitivity, given how delicate that particular issue is with people in Afghanistan, wasn't it pretty awful that this was allowed to happen in the first place? I mean, the incineration of the Quran,
It was a mistake.
various copies of the Quran.
Piers, you ought to talk to Congressman Allen West, who was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. And ask him how complicated and confused battlefields get, how tired people get, and ask him how one-sided the rules of engagement are. You know, I think we have gotten to a point of bending over backwards where we pretend that this is an orderly process. It's not. These folks are engaged in war. And you know, a lot of young men and women out there doing the best they can. And there is an unfortunate tendency in this administration to always assume that it's the Americans who made mistakes. It's the Americans who need to be apologized for. And I'm pretty unrepentant on this. I'm tired of our young men and women being ambushed, bombed, shot, and then we're being told we have to be sensitive. Well, I think the other side ought to be a little sensitive too.
Final question on this point. Given what you've been saying, and you're very strong with your rhetoric here, there have been many people that agree with you. It's a debate that's been raging all day. If you were president, are you saying that if this had been your situation on your watch, you would not only have refused to apologize before getting an apology from Hamid Karzai for the death of the soldiers, but you would also have stopped General Allen from making an apology?
What I would have asked for is a joint appearance. I think we need to have, look, if we can't be side by side with our Afghan ally, we don't have an ally. Now, we've just seen in Pakistan this same pattern play out, where we learned that for 7 years the Pakistanis had been protecting bin Laden. We learned that he was in a large compound in a military city less than a mile from their National Defense University. And what have we learned since then? Did the Pakistanis go out and find the people who had been protecting him? No. They went out and arrested the person who helped us find him. Now, I just think across the whole region, we'd better get a grip on reality, and we better reassess how we're doing things in a very profound way, because I think the region is spinning out of control, and I think it's getting more dangerous.
Let's turn to gas prices. You come out and said that if you were president, you would get gas prices down to $2.50. You've attracted a lot of quizzical eyebrows, Mr. Speaker. Let me put it as politely as that. I suppose my question to you is this. You've been very strong about Iran, and you were again at the debate the other night, along with the other candidates. One of the reasons that gas prices have been surging this week is on the back of an increasing fear around the world that there will be military action involving Iran, and that will impact on oil prices. Can you honestly continue to ramp up the rhetoric against Iran and sustain a credible argument that you would at the same time bring gas prices down to $2.50 when everybody knows the two would be inextricably linked?
Well, let me say, first of all, that's precisely why we better have an American energy policy. I mean, our strategic goal should be to get the United States producing so much oil and gas that we don't care what happens to the Straits of Hormuz. I think we have a deep strategic interest in becoming, once again, the largest oil producer in the world. And my guess is that we could be the largest oil producer before the end of this decade. Let me just give you 3 examples so you understand that this is a fact-based analysis. If the president had signed the Keystone Pipeline, 700,000 barrels a day of Canadian oil would be flowing to Houston. If the president had reopened the Gulf of Mexico the way he should have, 400,000 additional barrels a day would be under production. If the president would open known areas in Alaska that we already know have oil, there's another 1,200,000 barrels right there. This is without opening up any place else. But if the president were prepared to open up a lot of other areas, I think you could see us surge in production pretty dramatically. And if we had a couple of tax changes, including 100% expensing so all new equipment could be written off in 1 year, you would see so many independents out there exploring and developing new sources of energy. Take a look at North Dakota. which today has 3.5% unemployment and 16,000 unfilled positions in the oil industry because the folks who are unemployed don't have the right skill sets for the jobs that are available. That is a lot better future for America than the president's policies.
I mean, the president said yesterday that anybody who tells you we can drill our way out of this problem doesn't know what they're talking about or just isn't telling the truth. So basically he's saying, Speaker Gingrich, you're either lying or you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, look, the president is a left-wing radical who appointed as Secretary of Anti-Energy Dr. Chu, who has said publicly that he wants American oil gasoline prices to reach European levels. Now, to have a Secretary of Energy who wants us to pay $9 or $10 a gallon strikes me as the exact opposite of what most people want as a Secretary of Energy. I mean, I don't know if you've actually read the president's speech, but it could be on Saturday Night Live. One of the president's solutions, I just gave you 3 factual things he could do today. Just a signing of the pen. No change the law from Congress, build the pipeline, reopen the Gulf, open up the areas in Alaska. He can do it today. What does he have? He talks about algae. Now, I think biofuels are important. I've supported biofuels. I think in the long run, algae is important. But the idea that he thinks drilling won't work, so he's advocating algae, I mean, it really is very close to a Saturday Night Live skit.
Let's take a little break, Mr. Speaker. I want to come back. I want to talk about the big primary in Michigan and the auto bailout issue, which continues to rage and polarize opinion.